Here are some more entries from the journal. I probably have 2 days to give you the rest. Anyway, the Soviet Union killed God while conducting an experiment with interdimensional portals. Then they went into a covert war with a large group of glowing men. Entry 12. On week 8, day 3, I got word the glowing men stopped coming out of the gateway. The portal had closed and a letter was left behind. Apparently the letter read, "We don't and can't understand your world. Reading the minds of your people is impossible," which could only mean one of 2 things. 1. An alternate Yahweh is the Almighty God of your world, who isn't letting us into your minds and spirits. 2. There is no God ruling your world. Yeshua, the Son of Yahweh, has taken the throne in heaven, and now oversees heaven and earth. He has instructed us to turn the other cheek and close the portal to your unpredictable world. I chuckled at the incredulity of what I heard. So it was God, and we had really killed him. But this couldn't be it, right? I lost my brother to God's vengeful angels. If I had to fight and be in hell with him, then so be it. Once I reported back to the base, I met my commander for the first time in weeks. "So, the war ended today, huh?" I asked. "That was another intense one." "It ended 2 days ago," said the commander. "Did you get the news?" "About the glowing men being God's angels, and the fact that we killed God?" "Yes," said my commander. "Top commanders want to open the portal and sweep heaven for his crimes against our union. If Jesus really keeps his word, we shouldn't have a hard time doing so," I said. I was glad the war was over. As for the wishes of those at the top, can't stand the thought of going through the portal. The angels wanted us dead, and their creatures were terrifying on top of being deadly. But I can shake it to defend the Union and avenge my comrades. Entry 13. Over lunch that day, discussion surrounding God and the Bible was mounting. God was dead, and his angels avenged him by killing a bunch of us, and we were supposed to take it. What surprised me is that God was real in the first place. I was raised an atheist, although that's probably due to Stalin's crackdown on Christianity. My parents never spoke of any religion or God, so practicing religion always seemed alien to me. I had a babysitter who was obsessed with God, but I never practiced religion with him. I don't think I need to understand what God's army was trying to convey when they killed my brother, but it for sure wasn't all that good. Entry 14. I'm sitting on my bed right now, having just read a letter from Khrushchev. This is going to be interesting. Moments ago, letters were handed out to each of us. I could only guess it had to do with Yahweh. I opened mine up. It was a statement from Khrushchev. I read it all the way to the end without hesitating. This is what it read. These past 2 months we suffered great casualties, all at the hands of beings religions worship and call good. Reviewing the Holy Bible, I have found multiple instances of God, or Yahweh, committing atrocious acts during the time he was alive. Exodus chapter 21, verses 20 to 21. Verse 20. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. Verse 21. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or 2, since the slave is their property. Leviticus chapter 25, verses 44 to 46. Verse 44. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. Verse 45. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you, and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. Verse 46. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property, and can make them slaves for life, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. Peter chapter 2, verse 18. Slaves, in reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. Now remember, slave labor was a thing in America, and slave owners used the Bible to confirm their supposed righteousness. Then there was Job. Job worshipped God more than anybody, but had his family and pets killed by God, as a way of proving to Satan he could kill and abuse the people who followed him. And they would still have faith in him, because of his insistence that he was great. God was so full of himself, he betrayed his own people to prove himself, and to serve his own ego. Samuel chapter 15 verses 2-3. This is what the Lord Almighty says: I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel, when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Verse 3. Now go, attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. Children and infants were included, not spared despite their innocence. I thought the Bible was fiction written in a time when people killed those who related to criminals by blood. But seeing as we've made contact with a world where beings like the ones written about in religious scriptures are very real, I can proclaim we have been attacked by another cult army, led by a mad, egotistical tyrant, who would go as far as eliminating those who don't follow their beliefs, as well as those who aren't able to make rational or irrational decisions yet. We will reopen the portal, then we will march into heaven and overthrow whoever has succeeded Yahweh and replace them with a victim of their forced suffering. Your commanders will give you details on when Operation Fighting Angels will continue. Seems like I'll be heading into a land of horror and uncertainty. I just got consumed by chills recalling the Ophanim. Every time I recall it, I get a sense of impending doom. Hopefully I can take them down before they take my life. Entry 15. I'm about to head out to the portal. A ton of us are going in. This is the weirdest thing we've ever faced, but all I want to do is to make it out of this alive. Entry 16. Well, I can say I made it into heaven, but I'm completely lost right now. A pit formed in my stomach as I neared the portal. We went in a single line, probably the longest one I had ever been in. As I stepped through the light, I nearly froze, but then I saw the other side. A healthy green forest, a beautiful blue sky. I looked to my left and noticed some mountains in the distance. Despite all of that, there was an eerie calmness, like you're being watched by somebody, but you can't figure out where they are. As we walked through the forest, there was tension in the air. I held my gun close to my face and continued to follow behind my comrades. Soon enough, I heard an ear-puncturing boom, then was blinded by a light and pushed back into the soldier behind me. We both fell onto the muddy ground while the others fired in the direction the boom happened. I rolled into a bush and refocused while breathing heavily. Peeking out of the bush, I noticed two glowing men navigating through the trees. I fired at them both as quickly as I could. I hit one of them, but missed the other. He shot a look of determination in my direction. I fired at him before he could react. I just kept going, looking around, waiting until I was in the clear, then moving through the trees, heart beating fast, as I made my way to a good spot to take cover for when I needed to. I had to have traveled miles through that forest before anything else happened. I heard some shouting, followed by multiple sonic booms echoing throughout the area. My heart sped up even more. I ducked behind a bush and remained alert. I've moved several times and shot countless glowing men. Every single time I'm about to take a shot, I dread missing the target. I would die for my country, but I wish to continue serving Khrushchev and his anti-Stalinist agenda. Entry 17. After a few minutes of rest, I sensed an overwhelming presence. I peeked out of the bush, and beyond the tips of the trees there was a giant set of rotating wheels adorned with eyes. It had to have been miles wide and miles tall. My heart sank. I watched as a dozen shiny white beings descended into the forest. My view of them was soon obscured by the trees. I had no other choice but to run and make sure I continued contributing to the mission. I jumped out of the bush and sprinted for my life, navigating the dense forest. As I ran, a series of ear-puncturing booms shook the ground beneath me. About 10 minutes of heavy breathing later, I reached a cliff. Off in the distance was a rail yard on the edge of a small town. It was packed with probably hundreds of people. However, I was too far away to be able to determine if they were my comrades. As I watched on, I heard a thud behind me. I turned around and saw a glowing white being with 4 heads. 3 of them looked just like the heads of animals. One of them looked just like a human head. Before I could react, I was knocked unconscious by an invisible force. I awoke in a basement with cracked walls and dented pipes. A man who looked to be in his 50s was sitting in a chair directly across from me. He had shiny hair. My first thought was that I was kidnapped. However, this man wasn't glowing. What did he want? He chuckled. "So, you're another one of those soldiers from a different dimension," he said. Yes, I said. I know, he said. I heard of the experiment. The portal closing in on God, and just like that, they died. I didn't have much to say. My head was still spinning from everything that happened. So I asked him who he was. "I'm the one you're going to help," he said. "Are you an angel?" "No. I don't associate myself with people who exclude and kill those who don't follow or torture a so-called truth." "You're willing to fight with us?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "You guys did something that shattered our universe. The uprising is now going to start 3 years earlier than I had originally planned." The man balled his hands up into a fist. Then a patch of blurriness appeared between the man's face and my own. The blurry orb became an image of a white church with a crowd of people huddled around it. I could see movement in the crowd. The devil was showing me a film, or a form of extrasensory vision. He explained it was what was going on all over Earth. There were religious people huddled in and around each and every religious building on the planet. Young people, old people, animals too, not just people. He then showed me a different vision, one similar to the last, but taking place at the Notre Dame Cathedral. People were clogging the road. Some were sitting on top of cars. When God died, the world went into a collective shock. Since then, depression statistics have skyrocketed. People have become agitated, blaming one another for God's death. He showed me a vision of dead bodies lying in the streets of New York City. If I went to Earth to spread the truth about God, I would be outcasted. God tried to frame me as the evil one, and he did so successfully. Just by making me a main antagonist, then, over thousands of years, using popular culture to frame me as a giant red bull with horns who had a lot of spiritual power and did all the bad things God did. Wars, natural disasters, cannibalism. God enabled that shit, not me. I've been hoping to one day put an end to God's ruthless vengeance. I couldn't be anything more than amazed, especially with the part about him being framed as the evil one. I couldn't believe it, but I was speaking with the actual devil. "They follow him so blindly," the devil said. "Like they don't know he's in support of torture. They spin it as his great plan. But that's just rationalizing the torture they're being put through. They were told, 'Hey, follow this man, for he is the righteous one.' They all just went with it. And he won. Anyone who disobeyed him was executed, even despite being commanded not to kill. Some of them argue it's righteous, but if killing is bad, it's bad. I've killed, but only because God forced me to for the sake of his own ego. God killed 2 million. I killed 5. Not 5 million, just 5. One with the power of God could bring those 5 lives back. Yahweh didn't want to. I still couldn't believe it. The devil was on my side. I kept listening as he told me the New Testament as God gaslighting his followers. Just because somebody apologizes for something they did doesn't mean they didn't do it. If you instill trauma, don't expect somebody to come back to you. Then you have those religious extremists who harm people in the name of God. They're brainwashed, abusive children. This was beginning to hit close to home. I tried to sway the conversation to the uprising he mentioned. If God is dead, who are we going to bring down other than the angels? The devil shot me an understanding look, a distinct one I had never been given before. Who do you like? Women? Men? Well, we've constructed many different types of weapons for this very patriotic war. It's all right. You do what you're actually comfortable with doing. You're accepted here. The devil went on to explain the uprising. Now that God was dead, all we had to do was finish off his army. That was easier said than done, though. There were not enough soldiers in the devil's army to give, in his words, the captives of hell the upper hand. That was until the army I'm in angered God's angels. Half of them swarmed my reality, and apparently we had massacred them all. They were unfamiliar with the laws of my reality, but were too vengeful to stay away. Now the remaining half sit in heaven, having massacred nearly all of my comrades. My heart dropped at the news. The devil, however, told me I didn't need to feel an inch of concern, as, some time ago, he had convinced a third of God's army that the deity they worshipped so much was actually the devil lying to and gaslighting everyone. The angels believed that to be true, and so they mutinied. They all got sent to hell for uprising. Apparently, my army killed as many angels as those who mutinied, leaving 1/3 left. How many angels did my comrades and I kill? I asked. Over 1 million, said the devil. What? What about guardian angels? There have to be billions of them, especially after the baby boom. How is 1 million 1/3? Guardian angels don't fight God's wars. They surveil children, the devil said. What's Jesus Christ doing in all of this? I asked. Jesus Christ was a human manifestation of God. Not a separate entity, mind you. Now it's time to get to the planning stage of the uprising. The devil laid out his plan. Essentially, we were going into heaven in groups, then using guerrilla warfare to destabilize whatever order they currently had. After that, a vote would be held for a new leader, a new God. A God who would establish a new order and clean up the mess Yahweh made. But there was a catch, one that wasn't surprising. There's a 50% chance you perish in the uprising, no matter how well you take cover. My heart still sunk, however. But these beasts had to be stopped. I was in a position where I could help sway the order of heaven, which, as concept, was still very incredulous to me. Either way, it was what I had to do. My intuition was screaming at me to go and fight. I was going to end this. After the plans were discussed, the devil told me he wanted to show me a little something. He brought me upstairs to his living room. There he told me to look out the window. When I did, a pit formed in my stomach. People were hanging from the tree branches of every tree. The grass was yellow. Parked cars were vandalized. Bones were lying on the rooftops of homes. I shuddered and looked back at the devil. Who did those bodies belong to? Innocent doctors, psychologists, teachers. They were men who liked men, women who liked women, people with blemishes, women who wanted to be without a husband and choose what to do with their own lives and their own bodies. Oh, and some of those bodies you see are still alive. You couldn't tell which ones though. They're in shock due to multiple factors. I'm sleeping in the basement tonight. I recommend you follow through on that promise. Who in the right mind would murder innocents? The devil sighed. At least the Soviets are a necessary shield, he whispered to himself. Why wouldn't we be? Oh, no, I meant that differently. No. Anyway, before we do anything else, I'm going to show you a wider picture of the world out there. The devil brought me out to his car, a yellow four-door with dents and scratches all over. I was taken on a drive. Moving down the road, I gagged as bodies hung from the trees. Some swayed. The road was cracked and had a few holes filled with red liquid. Moving along a main road, I noticed a very similar scene, but there weren't as many cars around as I thought there would be on a road like that. A few minutes later, still moving down the road, the devil pointed out a gang stabbing taking place in a parking lot. People were walking by, looking dead in the face, not reacting to the dispute. The devil then hit the brakes. A dozen, I'm not sure what to call them, small spiky animals who spit many fireballs every 3 seconds were walking across the street. One of them was carrying what looked like a charred human hand, but I'm not sure. These things were clearly dangerous, and my heart rate increased as I waited for them to pass. Eventually they passed. Moments later, a truck with an eerie logo passed us from the opposite direction. Forbidden meat. It's not immoral, it said. What was that supposed to mean? If somebody comes to the door and asks you to meet them at a special restaurant at 5 p.m. and they don't have anything official on them, close the door, the devil said. That was the only thing he said to me the whole drive. The rest was just pointing. Aside from the first few things I mentioned, I witnessed a young man being shot in the neck, saw boarded up windows on several shopping centers, saw 5 crumbled homes, 10 groups of homeless individuals, and a lamb with 5 eyes that stood in one spot staring at me with a look of sinister determination. It was a crazy scene out there, but I guess that's what I had to know. Cage God put innocent people in was the same place he put killer creatures, murderers, and other monsters. Entry 18. I'm sitting on a bed in the basement. Well, 2 mattresses stacked on top of each other would be a better description. I hear animalistic screams echoing from all directions outside. There's now a deep pit of dread in my stomach. I don't know what might happen to me while I'm asleep. Hopefully I'll wake up without a mark. The windows down here don't have curtains, so I'm going to turn out the lights so none of whatever the hell's out there will see me.